Y'all think too small, I got big dreams. You just starting, I'm way ahead at the end scenes. Started reading and dodging all of the quick schemes. Money like your Spotify, boy, I got 10 streams. Be real big, I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids, just kids, that's wealth years.
Hi, I'm Daniel.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is Acquisitive, episode number 6, with our special guest, Donna Lewis, SBA Lender. And we're going to be going through the qualities of the SBA loan, how to get funded, and how to get into a deal. So welcome, Donna. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, I am an SBA BDO. I work for United Community Bank. So we are a preferred lender. We are also in the top 25 nationwide lenders. So as a regional community bank, we do a lot of SBA and we do it well. We are a preferred lender, and we also have some things in our toolbox that makes us a little bit more flexible. I have been in banking for longer than I like to do the math for, but I specialized in SBA, both halves of it. I did the 504 for a few years, but into the 7A program about 10 years ago. I think I'm over 100 million in closed loans so far, just me individually. The bank does about 200,000 a year, but we do a lot of SBA loans. I do both acquisitions, real estate loans. I am a full SBA lender, so anything that the SBA can do, we can look at lending. We also are pretty open in industries, so other than really basically hotels and gas stations, we can look at just about everything else. And I've done quite a wide variety of different businesses and types of industry in lending, and both acquisitions and expansions and real estate loans.
So something we haven't asked an SBA BDO yet on the show is what led you to getting into that career path, that loan to originate? Is it passion? Is it money? What was it that led you to that in that direction?
Well, I think what it is I was in business banking and commercial lending, and as part of that, I did the 504 program of the SBA, and the bank I was with at the time decided to become a real SBA lender and offer both programs, and I found that one, I was good at it, and two, it's very interesting. It is never dull on SBA. Everything is different. Every day is different. Every deal is different. You never stop learning. One SBA law changes at least once a year, sometimes in the middle of the year, and on top of it, it's gray. There are some musts and have-tos in SBA lending, but the majority of it is very gray and leads a lot to interpretation and allows us to kind of figure out what the bank can do and not do. I don't think a lot of people know that the SBA doesn't really have any money. So it is the bank's money, and so you will get differences between the banks and the lenders and the non-bank lenders of what they'll do and not do based on their individual credit policy. So it's unique, but it's fun, and it keeps me very busy.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they were talking about pursuing a relationship they had with a really small local bank for SBA loan, and I said, maybe go with somebody who does a lot of SBA, because the SOPs that they put out are very confusing, and they're interpreted differently, and they're going to be interpreted much more strictly and conservatively by a bank that doesn't do it very often. Whereas if you do it, if you're working with someone who's got a lot of experience, they know the gray area and they're more comfortable in that space. I think there's probably a lot of other reasons to go with a bank that has a lot of SBA experience. And also I wanted to ask you, what is a preferred? You said we're a preferred lender.
So we are a preferred lender, which means we are authorized by the SBA to approve our own loans. So a non-preferred lender or bank will actually they'll do their own bank underwriting, and then they'll send it to the SBA to be underwritten by the SBA and come back by them. So we can do our own. So we don't have to send the file to the SBA on top of our own underwriting.
That's a lot of time, yeah.
We learned on an earlier episode that time is probably the thing that kills most deals. So what kind of timeline would somebody be looking at difference wise to work with a preferred lender versus a non-preferred lender?
So that really depends on where the SBA is. So sometimes, if they're well staffed and not busy, you can, get it back in 2 to 3 weeks. There have been times where the SBA has taken months to get it back. And yes, time kills deals and SBA takes time. Even in the best circumstances, it takes time. It's a process, and I think it probably should be because these type of deals, one, are life-changing events for both parties. They're usually borrowing thousands to millions of dollars, and so it is a process. And my job is to get the client through the process, get them through that initial I want to own a business, and it's a dream to the reality of it. What we're going to be looking for, what is going to be expected of them, and what we look like, what we look for on, what they're going to buy on the selling side, how we put them together to, see if we have a deal there. So, and then once we have that, we have to go into credit, get anything credit is concerned about mitigated, and then closing, which is all the legal stuff we need to do to get a loan closed and businesses or property transferred, which can be its own animal in itself. So it is a process. So I think the biggest thing is communication and setting right expectations about, what the process is going to look like. The good and bad and ugly of SBA. It's a great program. It allows, people to get, to buy businesses to become owners, to businesses to grow and expand, where they might not be able to. But there are rules and there is documentation.
That is such an important takeaway for everyone, that just knowing that when you're choosing a lender, working with a preferred lender is preferred for many reasons, because a non-preferred lender, in many cases, best case scenario will extend your deal by 2 to 3 weeks. Worst case could kill it with months of delays. So that's amazing to know. Thank you for sharing that. And I mean, this process, it's so interesting. There's so many unknowns. So many of our listeners are first timers. They're looking to become deal makers. So, we really love to get into some of the deals that were a struggle to close, or maybe they failed to close. I know because you did a deal with my brokers that I'm a part of, I got to hear a pretty cool story. I'd love to hear just what are some, and we don't have to go too deep into the gray areas and what can and can't happen, but I'd love to hear, like, what can someone do to position themselves well to make it to closing, and if you could give us some examples from a deal that was maybe tough to close, whether it was on your side or tough to close on the buyer's side. I'd love to get some of those lessons and red flags for our listeners.
Of course, actually, I'll go over the one that we do know in common, kind of in high level, and then some things that are kind of out of left field that can sometimes happen that maybe not everybody thinks about. But in this one, it was rather unique because I not only pre-qualified the listing, so when somebody's ready to sell their business and they go to list it for sale, I will take a look at the purchase price they want, the financials, to see basically if it can support the purchase price they're requesting. Because when we look at that, we have to look at can this business support its operations, its new owner, and the loan that it's never had before. So we look and see what that cash flow is. On the buyer side, we're looking at the strength of the buyer, what their personal financial statement looks like, what their credit looks like, what their experience looks like, what they have behind them. So in this case, I was able to pre-qualify the listing, and I was also working with the buyer. He was a corporate person. He had a good corporate job, but just had a dream of owning his own business. And so we had a lot of conversations about what is going to be required, cash-wise, collateral-wise, experience-wise, what type of businesses to look for based on what he does, what price range to look for based on his financial status. And we actually talk through, I think, 2 or 3 businesses before we got to the one he eventually bought. And in this case, he had to have an investor because he did not have all the cash required. So he was able to find somebody who was willing to invest with him. And we had to talk through what that was going to look like, because that brings up different rules when it comes to investors and what the investor may or may not have to do. If there's guarantees involved, if there's not, if there's licenses involved, because whoever buys this business, if it requires a license to run, our buyer has to be able to have that on day one, in most cases. So so this is where, we get into the details. And then when we look at, the business, the seller, the business that's being sold and the buyer, we put them together. Like, does this make sense? Can this guy operate it? Can he take it over? What is the transition going to look like? What are you guys agreeing to in your purchase agreement? Because some of that SBA may not want, it may not be eligible. So you might have a great idea of how this purchase is going to work, but it doesn't fit in the lending parameters. So we may have to talk through that and figure out how to work it out. So in this potential deal, we did a lot of that. We ended up having to switch it from an asset sale to a stock sale. We had the investor. There were underwriting things we had to mitigate when it came to different things on the seller side with how their financials were, how their business ran, the client concentrations that they had. And then on the buyer side, we had to figure out, how does his experience work? What is his financial background? What strength does he have? Should the transition not go as smoothly as expected? Something out of left field hits you. And so, and that's where the length of time starts to stretch out, because, we were set on an asset sale, had to switch to a stock sale.
Can I hop in and ask a question? Was that transition? I'm a lawyer, so obviously my preference is an asset sale. And then, I understand that when you say that there's an investor, there's probably some kind of equity changing hands. Was that the reason to shift it to a stock sale, or?
Oh, the reason was really an aspect of the business and some qualifying that they had to do for certain clients, and to avoid the risk of having to go through a process that they had no idea how long it would take to where they'd be able to start doing those jobs. They felt it was better to stock sale. So it switched with that. And then so we were in closing as an asset sale. So then we had to go back and changing it to a stock sale as a credit event. So it goes back to credit because, it's underwritten a little differently. They also chose, there was some tax election that made it friendly like an asset sale, which caused us to need another entity involved. And then we had to go through, is it a passive company or is it 2 operating companies? And, and so there was just a lot of things to work out on that.
It's a great anecdote on stock sale versus asset sale. We talk about stock sales and asset sales, but you don't often think about one converting, switching from an asset sale to a stock sale, midstream, if you will, during the process. It sounds like there are just so many hurdles and risks that come with that. So we'll respect the confidentiality of this deal, of course, but some reasons for a stock sale over an asset sale could be, maybe key clients or customers in the business that maybe are under a government contract. Government contract could be really hard to get reawarded if there's an asset sale and you set up a new entity. And then, of course, the tax elements. So if you want to benefit from a qualified small business stock exclusion so you don't pay capital gains tax, you have to sell the stock in the C Corp. So there's some great reasons to do a stock sale when it's appropriate. But switching probably isn't a preferred way to.
Liabilities, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, so mainly it is when there are contracts or, medical providers with insurances, where we're switching that is there's going to be a delay and they could have to stop doing business until they get reapproved with whatever entity it was.
Some of the takeaways I'm taking away, first of all, preferred lender, it seems like a no-brainer. If I'd known that timeline that you described, then when I was talking to this guy yesterday, I would have, thrown a drink at them and been like, "Are you crazy? Go with a preferred lender. Your deal will never get through." And then secondly, it seems like you did a lot of advocating for this deal to get through by, talking to people, thinking outside the box, being creative, to make sure that, you can match up the requirements of the bank with the structure of the deal. That doesn't happen automatically. Somebody has to talk to all the parties and be an advocate. So that seems like a real success on your part. Congratulations.
Yeah, I try to do that. I try to, be really upfront in the beginning and talking to both the client and the brokers and, about what we can do, what we can't do. I work with a lot of brokers who they're like, we're talking about negotiating this. How would that affect, or what would SBA think about that?
Right.
And so I'm like, well, if you do it maybe this way, it would work. But if so there's things that SBA just will not allow, and so we have to work within those parameters.
That's some value that I think is really, really great to highlight, is having a broker, banker who really having all your intermediaries. I've had a lot of those text messages with the bank, like, "Hey, we're thinking about a 1% equity rollover. How would that look?" And, like thumbs down response. So, but it's really valuable because if you don't have people working on your deal team who have a relationship or willing to build a relationship, then you've got somebody just running headlong into redrafting all the agreements or doing whatever, socializing this new term with the other side that then you're going to have to undo. And that's going to cost you so much time, but also the most non-renewable resource of deal fatigue. People just can't hang in there that long with that many restructurings. So it's great that you have those relationships with the brokers. It's really good to find a deal team that all can work together.
And I think it's good for the client and the seller because even when, like when the change came, like, all right, it's going back to credit. We're going to probably extend this process another week or so because, we have to go back and re-underwrite it and re-document it as a stock sale. Those changes, they don't happen fast.
So, I mean, this buyer sounds like they were very lucky to have you as a, sort of a coach in their corner too, helping them get ready for the process. A little undercapitalized, needing to bring in an investor, needing to switch to maintain a key contract from an asset sale to a stock sale. How in the world did you get this thing closed? How did it go after it was switched to a stock sale?
Yeah, so I stick with them through the whole thing. So I kind of see it through from, like I said, I want to buy a business to, we're applying and we're in credit and, we're going through what we need to get credit comfortable with whatever we're doing and into closing because, these particular changes happen in closing. So I stay in touch. I keep in touch. We have a great closing team. We have a great underwriting team, but I always in the background, we'll follow up. We'll make sure they understand what's going on. We'll make sure that we get what we need. And if we get to a stale point where we're, not sure that something works, then, I step in and try to figure out where is our solution. If we have to get, credit back involved or we have to, pull in management to see, this is where we have us stuck. What can we do? And, in some cases, not all loans are approved. Not all, businesses are ready to be sold and not all buyers are ready to buy. But for the most case, if we can make it work, we'll try to make it work.
So when somebody's getting ready to buy a business, they say they want to buy a business. What would you recommend to be their first, 2 or 3 steps? What are some, maybe documents they should have? What are some things they should put in place that would help them get a jump start when they start talking to you?
So the first couple of things, a couple of things we're going to look at, is their personal financial statement. So what kind of cash they have, what cash are they going to use? Where is it coming from? Do they have additional income outside of what they're looking to do? Is all their livelihood going to come from this new venture? Is there a spouse that's willing to sign that has income? So we kind of talk through, what do they look like, financially? And we talk through what they do, because experience is key here. We have to feel comfortable that this buyer can run this business. And so we talk through, what are you doing now and what are you interested in buying? And we have to try to match up what the business does to what their history is and what their experience is, and find an industry or a type of business that is good for them. And then kind of determine, with the cash they have, what price range are they in. SBA is great because, in most cases it's 10% down. But we also require they have money left over. We can't take their last dime. They have to have, money. They can't take a paycheck right away from the new company. Can they still pay their mortgage payment for a couple of months? So we have to make sure that we're setting them up to succeed and not stretching them too thin. And some of the things we can do with that is we will put working capital in the business loan, and the one that we closed, I actually did a $500,000 express line on top of the acquisition loan, because they needed that kind of cash to do this business. We will give interest-only periods, where the first 3 to 6 months, they only have to pay interest on the loan until that transition is done and they're up and running. So there are some things that we can do to try to help, make sure that they have sufficient cash to run the business, but we can't lend them sufficient cash to, pay their mortgage. So they have to have that on their own.
Usually we ask about lessons learned or red flags from this particular deal that any listener could take into their due diligence, into their deal. But I think what would be even more valuable, if you could tell us, is what are some shining stars that could exist in a deal that really help keep the bank engaged? Because we've all seen bankers just say no to a deal. So what are some things that someone should look for in a business that you feel like makes it easier to bridge some of these challenges?
Most of it is probably the willingness to provide the information we request. If we're asking for it, it's because we need it for a reason, and to provide everything that we can as quickly as you can, because, we can look at it fast, and to be honest up front, to talk, when I first start talking to you, it's kind of like, we're in the point of period that we can make mistakes, that we can figure out what you need to do. Do you need to do something to get money in place? Do you need to, pay off some debt? Do we can talk through that and before we go down into credit and get things fixed. Because, what we want to do is make sure when we put you into credit, you have your best chance of approval. So that is the time that we can talk through all of your issues and figure out what needs to be done before we even start the application process. And, what can we fix? And you have to tell us everything. So if there's past credit issues, if there's past bankruptcies, if there's an SBA, we ask about, past criminal things, don't ever think it's been long enough, we'll never know. We will find out about it. So to talk through all of that stuff in the beginning, because if we know about it, it's not always a deal breaker. But if it's a last minute find and it feels like it was withheld, then that starts becoming an issue.
I think the reason we started this podcast was kind of to counter a lot of the content out there that's like, buy a business, you'll be a billionaire overnight, and say, yes, there's a lot to it. So, go in there knowingly.
Yeah, and businesses do not run themselves. I get a lot of people, I just want it to run themselves. And I'm like, they don't. If you want it to succeed, you have to be able to run a business. And if you are an owner, you have to be able to step in, because there have been times that a business has been closed and sold, and key employees or staff leaves. Things happen that you weren't expecting. There's a lot of things that can happen once you own that business, that if you're not willing to roll up your sleeves, it's not going to be successful. And you can buy a business that's generating tons of cash and very successful, and it not be very shortly after a sale. So, businesses don't run themselves. And when you're buying it and you're the new owner, you're probably going to have to be more hands-on and earn that ability to kind of let things run oversee. But in the beginning, plan to operate your business.
And that's good messaging, right? We talk about a buyer not coming to a seller saying, "Oh, I can't wait to just completely redo your business and offshore all the labor," because the seller doesn't want to hear that. And it's good to remind yourself too, the bankers don't want to hear about your plan to run your business from your sailboat, right? Like they want you to be
Right.
engaged. So focus on, the person at hand. Message yourself professionally as somebody who's willing to do the work, because think about what every party wants, and their motivation in the deal is, the bank needs to get paid. They need to know that you're willing to do what it takes to make sure that they get paid back. I hadn't really thought it through because I, used to represent a lot of startups, and there's a lot of pie in the sky investment in that space where they just give money somewhat freely with very little financial diligence. And the reason is, for startups and, kind of pie in the sky investments, you have so much upside. But the upside for a bank in these is just getting their money back with interest. The risk is pretty extreme and their upside is quite limited. So they're going to be a more conservative investment choice, and you've got to, be willing to get your ducks in a row and really make a good case for why they're going to get their money back.
That's true. That's all we really care about, is how we're going to get paid back and what could happen to make us, that could interrupt us getting paid back, and how can we mitigate that. So that is our sole thing. We want, we're lending out our depositors' money. We want it back.
So all of these amazing tips. So work with a preferred lender, communicate, be honest, set good expectations, and find the right deal, and you'll make it to closing.
About it. We close a lot of them. We have lots of happy business owners, business owners that I follow up with years later, and they're still doing good. So, it can be a process, but, once you're there, it's worth it.
Thanks so much for coming on, Donna. This was great.
For having me.
Thank you so much. And so for anyone listening who wants to work with you to fund their deal, how can they work with you? At what stage do you want to get involved with them, and where can they find you?
As I said, early is better. It's better to, talk through and make sure they have the right expectations as I think they start looking for businesses, because I think sometimes it's disappointing. They're like, "Oh, I want to buy this business." And then it's like, once we get into the details, it's not really a good fit. But I work for United Community Bank, and my email is Donna, DONNA, _Lewis, LEWIS, @UCBI.com.
All right. And we'll make sure that we include all of that in the description and the show notes wherever you're listening to this. So you can find Donna's contact information below, to the side, above, wherever it is. Thanks so much for listening. If this has been valuable to you, please give us a like, drop a comment if you have other questions that you'd like to have, us ask Donna or any other expert in the space, and subscribe to Acquisitive. This has been episode 6 with Donna Lewis. Thanks so much.
Big, I gotta make it just for my kids and for their kids' kids. That's wealth years and years. Promise my brother soon as he out and finish this bid, we finna do it bigger than